And so I'll hand over to Hannah. Hannah's an occupational therapist who joined our team in December of last year, mostly January. She started working full time with us, but I'll let Hannah introduce herself and her topic. Over to you, Hannah.
Beautiful. Thank you very much. Thanks everyone for joining us today. So I'm looking to present to you a little bit about accessible housing, what that means, and some of the little and the big things that we can do to make the home a bit easier to move around in, and more importantly, engage in the things that we want to be able to do in our home. As Stacey mentioned, I've been with MNG Queensland since about January. My background's largely been in complex equipment prescription as well as home modifications, primarily under the NDIS scheme. So today's presentation does draw my clinical background with the aim of informing different methods that the home can be more accessible. So what I mean by accessible, it's not necessarily just getting from one room to another in the home, but like I said, accomplishing those tasks that are really meaningful to us. So while making reference to the NDIS guidelines for prescription, I'm not going to be going to it too in depth in this presentation, recognising that everyone comes from different funding schemes. And also because with the NDIS, it very largely depends on individual circumstances. But if you do have any specific questions about funding, I'm more than happy to assist those with you if you want to contact me at a later time. All right, so we'll get going. All right, so when making our home more accessible, we always start with the least invasive option, which is usually the most affordable option as well. Usually we'll start off with something as simple as reorganising our environment, what we can do to get things in a more accessible position, or we might use assistive technology. If these strategies aren't going to be effective, we might move up to something like temporary modifications. If that will no longer meet our needs longer term, we'd consider something more complex. So by complex modifications, I usually mean structural changes or changes that aren't easily altered again. So for instance, buying more expensive items or having them installed professionally. So to structure the presentation today, we'll be looking at each area of the home and some of the common things in these categories I've either assisted with or seen colleagues prescribe to be able to engage in these specific areas. So firstly, we need to get into our homes. So we might reorganise the entrance we use as quite a common one. Sometimes we don't always need to use the front door. There can be back entrances that can be a lot more accessible for us than our particular needs. For someone who is walking, this might be because the main entrance has lots of steps or hazardous pathways, why we need to change that entrance. One of the common features I see in homes are things like step pathways with gravel in between, which can be quite hazardous. For people reliant on wheeled aids, we might need to change our entrance because of a lack of clear turning circle or lack of space at that particular entrance. So an ideal entrance will have a smooth, flat pathway, minimal steps, minimal turns immediately prior to or upon entering the door. And generally to address this need, like I said, we either change our entrance or we look into things like ramping. So in this particular picture, we've got our rubber ramping. So those are our temporary mods. We've also got temporary ramping there as well. Primary difference is those first two rubber ramps, you're not going to be taken anywhere. They're usually designed for the particular entrance. For some people, they like the portable ramps because they can take them to other locations. So if you visit family quite frequently, that can make not only your home more accessible, but their home accessible as well. And that last one there, we have a curb ramp. So for instance, if you're accessing your home via a scooter, it could be difficult to access your property from the street. One of those is, again, quite a common one. It's one of those things we do run past council though, because obviously if it's on the street, we can end up with some flooding issues, but it's definitely an option in terms of accessing the home. So if changing our entrance and the little ramps aren't going to work out for us, we can go into larger ramping solutions. So these ramps are generally used for any height over about 19 centimetres, and they can be a removable structure. There are places in Queensland with rentable modular ramps, so they don't need to be permanent structures. The one on the left is actually a temporary ramp, and the one on the right is a timber ramp that has been constructed for that. It looks like a school to me. If we're looking at anything over 1 metre, generally these types of ramps are not going to work out for us because they end up being too long. And that's when we start looking at other things like vertical lifts to get into the home. These are really expensive options because as well as the lift, you need the foundation for the lift, as well as the ongoing maintenance for the lift. However, it can be an option, particularly if you know, the rest of the house suits our needs. So now we've got to the front door, we need to get into it. Reorganising might include having a look at the keys. I don't know about you guys, I end up with one of those key rings with 6 or 7 keys on them from my previous homes, or random filing cabinets, and you know, the odd key that I have no idea what it does. Having a look at our keys and making sure we've just got the ones we need on, you know, that we're taking out with us can be a big help. On the slide, you can see a variety of key turners which reduce the dexterity required to turn. There's lots of new and brilliant technology out there as well. On the side there, you can see a security lock, which can either be opened via a smart app on your phone, or a fob key. So you literally just hold the fob key up to your door lock and it would unlock it. And that one's become a little bit more popular recently, I think. Yeah. That sort of option, again, isn't going to work out for us. There is also the option of automation. Automation happens in a variety of ways. You can have what's called a push and go lock. So that can be placed anywhere on your door frame. And so you might be able to hit it with your foot or with your armrest, or reach out to push a larger button. Or it could operate via, again, sort of a card that you have in your wallet. So if you're within 2 meters of the door, it would unlock and open the door for you. And I think it's 2 meters in range about that. So it gives you a bit of a lead up as you're coming to the door. So these sorts of AT are more likely to be funded under NDIS schemes if you are independent in the community and looking to access the community independently. There are a few options with doorways indoors as well. So that's kind of your outdoor option. So you might just decide to go without a door in certain areas inside your home, because that will make it easier, obviously, to enter that room, reduce property damage, reduce the need to actually open and close that door if it were to get blown shut by the wind, for instance. One of a more common modification I do is rehinging doors. So moving it from going into a smaller space. So for instance, if you've got a smaller bathroom and your door is going into that bathroom, it reduces the space further there. So you might have it rehinged to go into your hallway, which may or may not be bigger. Another common modification I do is they're called lift-off hinges. So when people have falls, we kind of look at the access way and what's the quickest way that we can get help to people if they've had falls. So for instance, in the bathroom, if someone were to have a fall in front of a doorway that swings in, and it wasn't possible to rehinge that door for, you know, potentially your hallway's quite small as well. There are modifications you can do where the help can actually lift up the door and take it off the hinge, so they can access those high risk falls areas quickly, so they can get to yourselves or the people needing support quickly. All right, so we've made our way to our lounge room and we are looking to sit down and relax, maybe with a movie. So a lot of people have the standing lounge, standard lounge or chairs they like to sit in. So one of the things I know Miriam's mentioned in her Go-Go Gadgets presentation, so I won't go too far into it, is raising the level of the lounges or recliners. And you can do this with pretty much any couch or recliner or chair. So it doesn't need to be a specific type. So I won't go into too much detail around that. I mean, there are different types of sit to stand recliners you can get. So there are different motors. If you have 2 motors, it might allow you to lay back. If you've got 4 motors, it will help adjust your head. So maybe you'll be able to see the movie or the TV a little bit better. And it can also provide some lumbar support if you get that 4-motor recliner. I'd recommend, if you are looking to get that sort of equipment, just have a quick chat with your OT about what will best meet the functional needs there. If you're having trouble utilising the remote of recliners, there are scanning remotes that you can get to maintain your independence with the features. So it's that green box down the bottom there. So one of the things that we can do is you can purchase another remote for your recliner so you can use it in the meantime and send that away to be programmed. This little green box then can be connected either to infrared devices such as a neuronode, or it can be connected to an adaptive switch, which can be utilised with your foot or your knee or your arm or your head. And it will allow you to select a feature of your recliner and then select whether or not you want that to go up and down. So if you're struggling with your remotes, that's a really good one. And it's also used for electric beds as well if we're looking to reposition ourselves in bed independently and those adjustable bed remotes are not working out for us. All right, so we've got ourselves in a comfy position and we need to turn off the lights for the movie to begin. So there's plenty of products such as one-touch lamps. So you can see that one and the golden one on the bottom there, in the corner there. If you touch the bottom of that lamp, it's going to turn it on and off, and it removes the need to do any pulling or pushing of small light switches or those little drawstrings that they have. So all of those, and there's also that light switch down the bottom there, which it's another common modification I do. Rather than the small little toggle switches, it's a nice flat panel, which can be a little easier to negotiate for people as well. So both the lamp and the adjustable bedding and recliner remote are both low cost, low risk. So they're quite easy to get through in terms of a consumable and an NDIS plan. All right. So the next option is if you have an automation set up, such as Alexa or Google Home Hub, you can get those to be compatible with things like lights. So there's that light up the top. It is a specific type of light they control. You can independently use automation for blinds. It's the blinds with the drawstrings. So it's a little device that pulls them down or pushes them up. It can also be used to help regulate the air conditioner or turn the air conditioner on and off. So again, not a cheap process to automate. So to give you an idea, to automate 3 separate blinds can be up to $450 for the individual devices. A colleague of mine recently did a whole home automation in South Australia, and that came to about $70,000 to do the doors, the blinds. Their whole home is literally automated. So I recommend, when we're thinking about that as an option, that we be really strategic about where we're planning on using it. And again, communicating with your OT about the areas that you're going to use. It doesn't need to get up to that cost. So it's just being mindful of the areas that you will be commonly using. So again, communication devices such as the NeuroNode Trilogy work on an infrared frequency. So we can, for instance, install a fan receiver that works on an infrared frequency, and then something like that communication device can communicate with your fan. So you can turn the fan on and off from that particular device. So that's, I guess the reason I bring that one up is because leading up, so we don't start off with needing an eye gaze or communication device, but it is something to keep in mind while we're kind of adapting our home on our journey. You know, we want devices that are going to be compatible with the things and the options that we want on future. So even though we might be, you know, using a flat toggle switch to do our fan at the moment, if the receiver for the fan doesn't have an infrared frequency, it limits our options in the future. We obviously don't want to have to change things we've already adapted. It can get quite frustrating. So just keeping it in mind on the journey. All right, so now we're ready for the movie. And I don't know about you, if I was sitting down ready for a movie, I would have one sulky staffy on my leg. So sometimes assistive technology and accessibility is not just about us. You know, we might want to snuggle from our pet, and there are ramps for dogs. There are different ways that we can allow our pet to come up and join us wherever we need to be. There's ramps for everything. Us OTs, we love our ramps. All right, so our movie's over and it's a bit of time for some food. So I'm not going to go into the gargantuan amount of food preparation tech out there. If you are interested, again, that Go-Go Gadgets with Miriam goes over a lot of those basics if you're looking for a broad spectrum of things. So I'm just going to go over some of my experiences and maybe start with a bit of reorganisation. And a lot of the time, kitchen goals, I've assisted with reorganisation. So for instance, having a coffee tray with kind of a setup of those basics with a plate and your little bits and pieces in an accessible spot. And we'll go through what that means shortly. That can make it a lot easier than needing to go to a cupboard to get our cups and then go to another drawer to get our spoon and then going over to a different part of our bench to get our tea and coffee. All of that can be quite exhausting. So being able to group things together in a place that we can reach them can make a huge difference. I had a client recently who's got essentially a water station set up with them that, you know, their carer assists with making sure that's nice and cool before they leave. So if they needed water, you know, that they have it for the period between the carer leaving and their partner returning. Having appliances, like I've said, an accessible part of the bench is really important. So that middle picture there is my very bad drawing of a U-shaped kitchen. Those red corners are identifying the hardest bits of the kitchen to get to. And funnily enough, it seems to be the position that everyone puts things. Microwaves in the corners, or again, the kettle in the corner. Those green areas are going to be our most accessible. So again, another common renovation or home modification I assist with is putting power points in different places, putting it towards the end of the bench so that we can have the equipment there and not need it to be all the way towards the back of the bench or in those inaccessible spots. Another tidbit for people preparing their own food or looking to be able to access food in the cupboards is reorganising the cupboards so that we're not going to be dropping things as we're trying to select particular items. So having things in the middle shelf as close as we can to the front is generally what we're ideally aiming for. Containers are kind of a hit and miss for some people. The container lids can be just as hard to negotiate. There are different types of containers you can get. There are ones that can open with a button push, and recognising that can still be difficult for people. Being able to use things such as a stylus on an active hands glove, for instance, can mean that you can open that container easier. It also means that we can reduce the amount of items in a container as well to make them lighter weight, which some people find beneficial too. So if, for instance, they're looking to prepare their breakfast, instead of having a whole box of, you know, wheat bix that we're looking to pull out, separating some of that out into a light container with an accessible lid means that you're only looking for that small container. And for instance, when family, friends, or a carer comes around, they can help refill those items to help your independence across the day if needed. Beautiful. The other thing I was going to mention about the containers is that you can put things like grip tapes on them. So if, for instance, holding on containers, even if we've done the light rate as a problem, we can put tapes on them, which make them easier to hold to try to reduce the risk of them falling from our hands. All right. So the most common modifications I've engaged in are making the kitchen sink more accessible. So this allows for both chair seating as well as wheelchair accessibility. So a lot of people can find standing by the bench preparing food or standing while they're doing dishes, for instance, quite fatiguing. So having the capacity to be able to sit comfortably without having to reach so far can be very freeing for some people while engaging in tasks. So I generally achieve accessibility with removing cupboards under the sinks, extending the faucets on the sink taps, or relocating the sink taps to the side of the basin or to somewhere accessible. So you can see that in that first picture. We don't have, we've got cupboards still, but we can open them up for accessibility. So some people prefer that for aesthetics, can remove the doors completely if you wish. In that bottom picture, you can see our nice long water faucet there to the side. So using the tap lever at that position just means we don't have to reach so far back to the end of the bench. The other item there is having a bench at seated height where we can prepare food. So you can see up in that top right corner, it's a nice level. We're not having our chicken wings trying to get up to a bench that's too high. That can be achieved either by a kitchen bench or having a dining room table at a certain height, or having an adjustable table if you're fortunate enough to have a lounge room big enough to accommodate all of those pieces of furniture. And again, it's something to have a chat to your OT about, because home modifications are about function. You know, we can recommend a whole bunch of AT, but if we end up filling your home with all of these bits and pieces, you know, it's not going to be very functional. All right. We've got all our food and we're looking to enjoy it at our dining table. So again, there's a huge range of eating utensils in the Go Gadgets webinar with Miriam, so I won't go too much into that, but I will add one of the items people find assistive is the Revolution chair, which is that first and second picture there. Rather than needing to sit in your chair and lift and move it under the table, this particular chair rotates. So you can walk up to your chair, sit, rotate around so your legs are under the table, and then it flicks forward as well. So it actually moves under the table for you. So you've got a better access or reduced reach to use the table. So that works on lever systems, which they're quite kind of like office chair levers, but we can adapt them and find different solutions to using those levers. And I find it's been quite a useful piece of equipment for a lot of people I've seen. In recent history, the OB arm feeder has also become quite popular when we've got limited use of our arms or dexterity in our hands to use any of the other aids we've talked about. This particular arm is, it can be programmed to your certain height and position and either triggered by a switch when you're looking for the spoon to do its job, or it can be automated as well to keep aiding with the scooping of the food and bringing it to your mouth. It is definitely one that I trial with people. It is not everyone's cup of tea, but my colleagues have found a lot of success with this item and reducing the dependence on others for feeding. All right. All right, so now we're heading through to the bathroom. There is plenty of reorganising that can happen in the bathroom. That first picture is not my bathroom, but it could be. It does tend to be a place that gets a lot of clutter. Again, minimising the amount of clutter and having your commonly used items towards the front of the vanity, or using shelving. So if you don't have a vanity and you've got a clear wall, you can place either suction shelves, or that you can get a modification to put a shelf in just for those items that you use on your day-to-day. Can be quite good. So the middle one there is, oh, sorry, my apologies, I'll just go back. As well as decluttering the vanity, you can also, some of the common modifications I do is a recessed basin. So unlike the kitchen basin, the bathroom basin we can usually move a little bit forward for things like washing your face. I think I've got a picture. I might have jumped ahead. Yeah, sorry. Oh, I think I've got some recessed basins to show you coming up. So I'll just run through these pictures. My apologies. So a couple of more aids, and again, I'll try not to go too far into the AT knowing that it was presented previously, but you've got your backwasher in that middle one there. That's a temporary modification. It's done by suction, but it is essentially a scrubber. So if you're standing but you've got problems with dexterity, maybe holding washcloths or holding sponges, you can lean up against this one and it assists with back washing, which is generally our hardest to reach place. The other item is called a shower buddy. So this one here is, I mean, usually I would try to go for a transfer bench to get over a hob, but where that's not possible or we're needing a little bit more support than what a transfer bench can provide, the shower buddy is the next level up. So this particular commode or shower chair runs on a track, and that track just gets put down and picked up quite easily. So you can lay the track, be assisted to get into the shower by running the chair across the track, and then the chair can also turn around. It's kind of a hard, awkward one to explain. So I've popped the link there. If you think it's something that might be useful, pop to the website. They've got some videos of how it works. But particularly with smaller bathrooms where modification, for whatever reason, isn't going to work for us, or if we need a solution more immediately, it's definitely an option that I would be looking at. All right. So the most common temporary mods would be a shower base insert. Whether or not you can add ramping into the shower is very dependent on where it is in your bathroom. By removing the shower door or leaving it open while you're showering, you might risk water damage, particularly if it's near a doorway. This is because splashback can happen from the shower, soak into the ground, and you can end up with foundation issues. So please, before you do anything with your shower doors, again, just chat with an OT or a plumber to make sure that you're not going to cause any permanent damage to your home. A major modification for an accessible shower will usually consist of a level access shower. We generally try to aim for something around 120 centimetres by 120 or configuration thereof, with a handheld shower hose and strategically placed taps and hoses. So taps don't necessarily need to go in one place. Part of the beauty of being an OT is I get to look at the standards and where the guidelines say, but then I get to meet you guys, see what's actually functionally going to work out for you, and then we can make a decision based on your circumstances and what it is specifically that you need. So quite often I go against an Australian standard because for a particular person, it's more fitting for it to be in a different place. All right. This is where I get to my recessed basins. I jumped ahead a lot. So the vanity is a more common feature of modification. Having it accessible, again, for seating or for wheeled aids for grooming is generally a highly desired option. So the semi-recessed basin reduces the length of reach required to get to the taps. The middle picture of the recessed basin is probably a bit high up in profile. Does mean that you end up having to lift your arms a little bit more to get your hands over into the sink. So I usually go for something a little lower profile than that. But again, extended faucets, tap levers, side placements of taps can make it easier. Sensor taps are also a really good one. So just being able to place your hands underneath them rather than having to worry about levers can also be an option. All right, so toileting. So there's a variety of different toileting equipment that people can find assistive. So you've got your basic toilet wiping aids. I don't particularly like the toilet wiping aids. I haven't really met anyone who's found them incredibly helpful. And the main reason is because you still have to load the toilet paper into it, which can be just as difficult as not using it, in my opinion, but I'd be interested to see if anyone has found them effective. The other items are things like grab rails. In the middle there, you've got an aerolet. So that is a aid that helps with transfer. So it lowers and heightens. It can tilt as well. You can put a bidet on top of it if you're using a bidet. So where we're not really getting the strength we need to push through something like a toilet surround frame, this structure can really assist. It is quite bulky. But you also don't need to use the lift and lower function if there are other people in the household looking to use it. It can be utilised as a standard toilet as well. So if you're doing anything with your toilet or looking to get a bidet, again, it's really good to have a chat to your OT, because we know little nifty information that you need with bidets. One of the primary things we look at is making sure it's a sensory, that the seat for the bidet, we can turn the sensor off. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with bidets. They work by sitting on them. So when you sit on them, the functions are now operational. So that is fine as long as we're sitting directly on the seat. But if we start to use things like a toilet and commode, where we're actually over the bidet, the bidet will no longer work. So it's really important that we get a bidet where, again, we consider those long-term options to make sure that we're not having to change out equipment. There is also things like plumbing standards, but again, have a chat to your OT if you are looking into a bidet, because there are items there that you'll need to be aware of. So other permanent modifications I do is literally changing the toilet itself. We can change the toilet height, which can aid in transfers. The only times I really do this is where we're looking at bathroom modifications and there's some suggestion that the toilet might not survive the modification. Then we have a look at being able to replace the toilet to a height where we might not need any other equipment currently, but also considering, again, those long-term needs, making sure if we do put anything else on over the top of it, like a bidet or a toilet seat raiser, that it would still be functional. All right, brilliant. So we're finishing up the evening routine, so we're going off to bed. So in the bedrooms, reorganising the wardrobe is again a really good one for making sure we can access our clothing. Having items on a mid-level rail, so that's another common one I do, putting in additional rails for clothing, can reduce the need to reach up, which a lot of people can have problem with while maintaining their balance. You can get particular aids, so that top picture with the little fork looking thing can help retrieve coat hangers from your dresser. There's an aid below with the gentleman in the wheelchair. That's a device that can be installed that would bring the clothing from a high position to a lower position, so he can actually reach his items without the need for the reach aid when he brings it down closer to him. One of the common things I do is have all my shoes on the floor, which when I was having issues with my back caused significant issues. So I did a bit of reorganizing of my shoes and popped them all in a shoe holder. So this is a permanent stand, but you can get I'm sure you would have seen them, the shoe holders. They're kind of like they're like a little Velcro thing that you place over the wardrobe rail, and you can put your shoes into them. And having them at that waist height or between your waist and shoulder can reduce all of those high-risk activities that might cause falls. So again, we've got our little bed scatter if we're having trouble with our adaptive bed. The most common ones in the bedroom for me are hoists, people looking at hoists. There are temporary options. You've obviously got your mobile hoists. You can get mobile or temporary ceiling hoists. You can see the infrastructure in the middle picture there. They can go across the whole room, so they don't need to eat up the circulation space in the room as they are in those pictures. And certainly for some people that, you know, that solution works for them. A lot of people I work with find the pivot frames. So you can see that I'm pointing like you can see my screen. You can see the pivot frame in the bottom corner there as well. And that helps with kind of moving our position to help us into a better seated position. So that frame is only available on a mobile hoist. So some people prefer that instead of the ceiling hoist option. You can also do permanent modifications. You can see the bedroom on top where we reinforce the ceiling. That particular one is what we call an H-frame. So it can move literally to any point in the room. The times that I have recommended installation of one of those is where we've got particular, as well as a wheelchair, that there are multiple places in the room we might need to be. So for instance, if there's a seat by the window that we sometimes like to sit in, like a recliner, or if there's a particular area, specific area the wheelchair needs to be, where using a mobile hoist isn't going to be feasible. So the area might be quite small and there's not enough room to move that hoist in and out. That's another common reason for a ceiling hoist. The other thing that we have a look at in modifications is the floor. So you can see the common thing with both of those bedrooms in the pictures, they've got wooden floors. Not always the case. Some people have carpets, and that can make it a little bit harder to use things like mobile hoists. It's not uncommon for me to assist in replacing with vinyl or a like wooden smooth surface to reduce that friction and making using those mobile hoists a bit easier. Okay, so the stairs. If we are in a home with stairs, this can be a difficult one. So the first thing I would generally look at is reorganizing. Is there a need for us to go upstairs? Is there potential for us to be able to use one of the downstairs rooms instead of needing to go upstairs? So converting, for instance, the guest room to the main bedroom is a common one. If we're looking at alternate options, generally we start with a stair chair lift. Whether this is appropriate is really highly dependent on how our body is able to hold itself up in our core function, how narrow the stairs are, and how structurally sound they are. We're really fortunate in Queensland that we do have a provider that does rent a stair lift, which makes it a temporary modification. It also means that we can give it a try, and if it doesn't work out, then we've not had to do that permanent structure to your stairway. The availability of this rental is not a constant, and not all stair lifts can be used indoors and out. So if it is something that you're looking for, and much like a lot of things in the M&D world, getting in earlier rather than later so we can take advantage of that window of opportunity is highly recommended. If the chair lift is not going to be an option for us, again, we can look at vertical lifts in the house. We've got a vertical lift in that corner there. This doesn't have to be an expensive option. I mean, it's not a cheap option. It's definitely more affordable than it used to be. In most cases, this will be a very long process because we would need to do a lot of justification around how it's going to be used and why the other solutions will not work for us. Yeah, I find it an interesting one, but it's definitely doable if it is something that we need to access the upstairs. So if we've done everything that we can and our home is still not working out for us in terms of accessibility, a lot of people do look for alternate accommodations. And again, you would have a group of people to support you to locate accessible homes if you were looking to change properties. usually the people looking to change properties are have homes, for instance, a Queenslander style house where we've got multiple levels and access is going to be extremely difficult, or significantly change the infrastructure of the house, or if the house for instance, is not in a state where we're able to provide those home modifications. And again, that's we never jump straight to let's change house. We always try to make an accommodation work. But if there is a circumstances where we need to, we can definitely assist with finding alternate accommodation. So the first link I've got there is for Livable Housings Australia. So that one I use as a guideline for what I'm ideally looking for in an accessible house. It gives specifics, and some people are interested in the specifics. How big should my room really be so that it's accessible for a chair and a hoist? How wide do I need between my kitchen bench and a floating food prep bench? And I also use this for a lot of justification around a lot of the modifications we need. So if you're looking for specifics, that's your go-to guide. If you are looking to see what else there is around there in terms of modifications, of alternative housing, Housing Hub's also a really good resource. That's essentially the realestate.com.au of accessible housing. It's got both mainstream housing, and if you're in an SDA property, it does have alternate SDA properties on there as well. Yeah, so that's all I have for you today. I hope that was of use. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to field them for you.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Hannah. That was really useful. I did like your transitions between slides as well. There's some interesting choices in there. If I could ask everyone that's muted themselves to unmute now, so we can do a bit of a Q&A, that would be excellent. Just before we do that, one of the things that you alluded to a couple of times there, Hannah, around getting in early for people with MND and making sure that any devices are compatible with future communication device needs. I think that those are really critical points, and certainly one of the reasons why we at MND Queensland decided that we wanted to employ our own OTs, so that we could ensure that expertise around MND grew through working purely with people with MND. Obviously there's lots of OTs out there that have got a range of experiences, but we definitely encourage people to try and make sure that their occupational therapist, whoever they are, does understand the disease in depth and the potential progression of that disease. So thanks for raising that. So I have a couple of questions, but before I take over, has anyone else got any questions they wanted to ask? No? Okay, so a couple of questions then that I wanted to ask about was the ballpark costs. So obviously you've gone through lots and lots of different options there, but a couple really jumped out to me, given that they would be suitable or potentially suitable options for some clients I work with, but clients that aren't fortunate to have enough to have NDIS funding. That accessing the home, if you're out independently, is something that comes up regularly. How much, just ballpark, would it tend to cost to get those automated door solutions in place?
I believe the device itself is $400, but it depends on the door they have. So, for instance, if it's not going to be compatible with the door, they'd have to replace the door, which. Yep. Again, that's an added cost, but the installation is quite basic. I'm finding it hard to give a ballpark there because it varies so much, but the device itself is around the 400 mark.
Okay, yeah, look, and I knew that I'd be putting you on the spot with a question like that, but I think that certainly makes it sound feasible, $400 rather than the several $1,000s that lots of these solutions do cost.
Yeah.
And what about that?
And that's why, again, being strategic. So automation, it's fantastic, but it does, you know, the financial considerations of them are considerable.
Yeah.
But I feel like when the finances are the biggest barrier, we can usually try to minimize the cost when we really break down where exactly that we're going to need them. And that doesn't necessarily have a reduced outcome. That's just spending a lot more time having a real think about, well, what times am I going to likely be needing to use this, and what areas of the home I'm likely to be in during these times.
Yeah. Yeah, fair enough. And so what about that, like, robotic arm feeder? How much generally would they be?
So that's one that my colleagues have trialed. I'm yet to actually do a purchase with them. I'm actually doing a trial with the Queensland distributor next week. Oh no, in June, sorry, in mid-June. So I can get back to you with the current costing of that, but that would be a wait and see.
That's great. Okay. And so you mentioned earlier that you're happy for people to contact you directly should they want to. What's the best way to do that?
Probably by my email, so that I've got a record of to ensure I get back to you. I'm not sure where I can put that up, or if you can pass on that information.
Yeah, we can post it with the recording. So that occupational therapy one.
Yeah, that'd be fine.
Great. All right. Any last questions before we finish up today then?
Yeah, I've got one.
Excellent. Hi, Patricia.
Everybody. Hi, Hannah.
Hey,
with the kitchen and the bathroom sinks and so on, the furnishings that go in the kitchen, would the builder that you recommend, would they find those for you, or do you have to go and look for them and then tell the builder blah blah?
You can do it either way. I will usually assist the people that I'm helping with product recommendations to ensure that it's specific to your needs. So a lot of builders, bless their cotton socks, can have an idea of what they feel will be appropriate for people with disability. Doesn't always translate to what you need. So to give you an example, I had a client who their toilet would not survive the home modifications, and I needed the builder to elect a toilet so that I could put a bidet on top. The toilet that he elected for was what they call an above height toilet. This particular lady wasn't transferring herself. So if we'd taken his recommendation for the toilet plus the spacer plus the bidet, we would have ended up with this ginormous toileting structure that no one in the house could have used but her, because she was using a commode. So I always will provide product recommendations, and I will always try to make those products, I will try to use products that I know are within people's local areas, and I will encourage them to trial them. You don't have to trial them, but it is a decision I would be making based on my knowledge of you, which, you know, hopefully it's close to accurate, but, you know, the only way to be certain would be to go out and trial it. But you don't need to, but I would always ask your OT to have a look at product recommendations. Sometimes I will ask builders around, you know, what their recommendations are, to add it to my things to know list, as well as to kind of sneakily look at their experience. But I definitely wouldn't just go straight with a builder recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thanks for that question, Patricia. Any other questions? No? Okay, all right, well, we will wrap up there. Thank you everyone for coming along today. Hope you all found that as useful as I did, and thank you, Hannah, for your time in putting that presentation together. It's very, very much appreciated.
No worries.